This is a real base story about a childhood friendship. From the moment Ashley and I met in grade school, we became fast friends. We sat together in class, helped each other with homework, and spent weekends playing games. We shared everything, our favorite books, songs, even our dreams for the future. Over the years, our bond grew stronger and we became inseparable. But like many childhood friendships, time and circumstances changed. I moved to a different school after 8th grade, but Ashley and I stayed in touch. However, as time passed, the calls and messages became less frequent. Eventually, she stopped contacting me altogether. Ashley's father, who was in a high-ranking government position, was transferred to another city. The family packed up and left without much of a goodbye. We never really got to say proper farewells, and that marked the end of our friendship, or so I thought. As the years went by, I occasionally thought about Ashley, wondering where she had gone, how she was doing. But life went on, and I grew accustomed to her absence. It wasn't until 5 years later, out of nowhere, that I received a message from Ashley. She had returned to our hometown. My heart raced as I read the message. I couldn't believe it. After 5 years, I was finally going to reconnect with my childhood friend. The excitement was overwhelming. The day I met Ashley again felt surreal. I had been anxiously waiting to see her, my mind racing with memories of the fun times we had shared as kids. When I finally saw her face again, it felt like no time had passed. She looked different, of course, older, more mature, but still, unmistakably Ashley. We hugged, and I could feel the warmth of her embrace, the same comforting presence I had known all those years ago. We spent hours catching up. She told me about her life in the new city, her experiences, the friends she had made. She had grown into a confident young woman, and I was fascinated by all the stories she had to share. We talked about our school days, laughing about the silly things we had done and reminiscing about the teachers we had hated and the pranks we had pulled on classmates. After the long conversation, we decided to go out for a walk around town, like we used to. It felt like nothing had changed. We visited our old hangout spots, laughing and chatting as though we had never been apart. I felt so happy to have Ashley back in my life. It was a moment I will never forget, thinking that we would pick up where we left off. After a week of hanging out and reconnecting, I started to notice something strange. Ashley had always been full of energy, laughing easily and sharing stories with enthusiasm, but over the past few days, she had become oddly distant at times. She would zone out for long periods, staring into space, and I would have to snap her out of it. At first I brushed it off, assuming she was just tired from her trip or adjusting to being back in town. But one evening, something even more unusual happened. We were sitting in her room talking about the past, when she suddenly grew quiet. I asked her if everything was okay, and she nodded, but her eyes were clouded with a strange, distant look. It wasn't like her at all. She seemed different. I attributed it to jet lag or the stress of settling into a new routine, but the unease in the pit of my stomach refused to go away. I didn't think too much of it at the time, but as I reflected, later I realized that these odd moments were becoming more frequent. Ashley seemed to be fading little by little, and it left me with a feeling I couldn't quite shake. It was a typical evening when the unthinkable happened. I had just left Ashley's house after our usual hangout, but this time I didn't receive my usual goodnight message from her. At first, I thought she might have fallen asleep early, but as the night passed and there was still no word from her, I began to get worried. I called her, but the call went straight to voicemail. Something didn't sit right with me. The next morning, I decided to check on her. I knocked on the door of her house, but there was no answer. I tried calling her again, but the phone remained silent. Panic started to set in. I knew something was wrong. I let myself inside, hoping to find her still in bed or simply out of touch. But when I searched her room, I found no sign of her. I checked the whole house, the kitchen, the living room, even the bathroom, but Ashley was nowhere to be found. At first, I thought maybe she was just playing a prank on me. She had always enjoyed pulling off tricks when we were kids, but this felt different. My heart was racing as I searched the yard, the garage, and every corner of the house. But she was gone. I even checked the streets outside, thinking maybe she had gone for a walk or had left without telling me. Nothing. The hours passed and the fear inside me began to grow. It was unlike Ashley to just disappear without a word. I tried calling her again and again, but there was still no response. As I waited by my phone, the possibility that something had happened to her began to dawn on me. I couldn't imagine what could have happened, but I had a sinking feeling in my stomach that told me I needed to find out. I called some of our mutual friends, but no one had heard from her either. I tried contacting anyone who might have known where she was, but there was nothing. It was as if Ashley had vanished into thin air. The more I thought about it, the more unsettling it became. It didn't make sense. She couldn't have just disappeared like that. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. With no other options, I decided to call Ashley's mother. I explained everything to her, from our reunion to Ashley's sudden disappearance. I told her that Ashley had been with me just the night before and now she was gone. I was frantic, unsure of what to do. I had to make sure she was okay, to figure out where she had gone. When I told her mother everything, her voice changed. She sounded confused, almost like she didn't understand what I was saying. "What do you mean she was with you?" she asked, her voice trembling. I repeated myself, telling her that Ashley had been in front of me, that we had spent time together just hours ago. But Ashley's mother's response shocked me to my core. "Are you sure you're okay? Ashley died in a car accident 3 years ago." I froze. My heart stopped and my mind raced. I couldn't understand what she was saying. "What do you mean she died? She was just here. We were together. She was alive. How could she be dead?" I shouted into the phone, my voice shaking. Ashley's mother responded quietly, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, but Ashley has been gone for 3 years. How could she have been with you?" In the midst of my disbelief, Ashley's mother promised to send me the death certificate and some photos from the funeral. She insisted I needed to see them to understand. I didn't know what to think. The Ashley I had spent time with just days ago had been standing right in front of me, alive, smiling, laughing. How could she have been dead for 3 years? I couldn't wrap my head around it. There was no way she had been a ghost or some trick of the mind. She had been there, had felt real. I needed to see the proof, to understand how this could possibly be true. My hands shook as I waited for the documents to arrive. A few hours later, Ashley's mother sent the death certificate and photos just as she had promised. I opened the email with trembling hands and stared at the documents. The death certificate confirmed what she had said. Ashley had died in a car accident 3 years ago. The photos from the funeral were haunting. The same face I had just seen smiling at me was now cold and lifeless in those images. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my stomach as I looked at the photos. There was no mistake. It was Ashley. The woman in the picture was the same person I had just spent time with. But how could this be? How could she be dead and still be here with me? The documents in front of me were proof that Ashley had passed, but my memory, my experience, was something else entirely. I wanted to scream, to cry, but all I could do was sit there, frozen in disbelief. Days passed and the feeling of dread never left me. The ghost of Ashley lingered in my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Had I been visited by a spirit? Or had something far more sinister been at play? I tried to talk to people about what I had experienced, but no one believed me. They told me I was imagining things or that I had been under stress, but I knew what I saw. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like something dark had happened. Had Ashley been trying to tell me something? Had I unknowingly crossed into another realm? It was as though I had touched something beyond the world I knew. The experience haunted me every day, and no matter how hard I tried to move on, I couldn't escape the truth that I had been in the presence of someone who was no longer alive. To this day, I have no answers. I don't know what happened that week when Ashley returned. Was it really her? Was I imagining it? Or had something supernatural occurred? The mystery remains unsolved, and I don't know if I'll ever truly understand what happened. I've come to accept that some questions are meant to remain unanswered. But one thing is certain. I will never forget Ashley, the friend who returned from the dead, even if only for a brief moment.